This is Unit 9 Notes, Evidence of Evolution. So our last unit, we talked about what evolution is, the mechanisms that can cause it to happen. Now, these are different evidences that support when evolution is occurring over time in a population or in different species. So, obviously, this was supposed to be done in class. We're not in class. You don't have to draw an example of a fossil, but when you think of a fossil, what do you think of? So I think of a trilobite. I know, science teacher, but it's like oh, yes, you can laugh if you want to, but it's like they've got these things all the way down, and I'm a terrible drawer. I either think of this, art is not my strong suit. I either think of this or like the snail shells, the nautilus shells, um, or maybe like a leaf that's been imprinted, right? Because it's not there anymore, but you can see its imprint left behind. So, what is a fossil? A fossil, um, they're preserved remains of ancient organisms, right? They're not bone anymore. They're either impressions or petrified, and they become stone or rock. And we can look at the fossil record, that's what this is called, for evidence of change. And so down at the bottom, you can see my little trilobites. Yes, that doesn't look anything like my picture, but that's what it is. And then you've got these guys down here. And so over time, we can see the changes that have happened, right? We can date fossils depending on, it's called carbon dating, the age of the carbon, how much carbon is left, um, can tell us how old those fossils are. And we also follow a principle of superposition. So it makes sense that the lower layers of rock are the oldest species, and then the newer layers of rock are going to contain the youngest species. And so the succession is we can see the change over time, right? And so we can see that these weird little uh, quadrilateral quadrilateral shapes here are replaced by the trilobites. The trilobites are replaced over time, and we can see succession and see the change that's happened in the species in the layers. So it says which layers show aquatic ecosystems. So if we look here, we can see um, we got fish here. So these guys, this was when it was water, and then these guys probably is when it was water, right? Okay. All right, so an example of how we use the fossil record. So horses, this is a common example on the STAR test. It's a common example in questioning that you're going to get horses. Over time, you can see what has happened to the horse population. They became bigger, right? As they became more well adapted to wide open plains, they needed to be able to run. So if you look down here at the bottom, the ancestors of the horse, they had toes, right? But if you're trying to run fast and you get injured because you have more bones that can break, then that's going to make you less likely to survive. And so if we look up, they become bigger. They can run faster because now they have a hoof, and their teeth have changed over time too because they eat oats and grasses. And so they're chewing and grinding a lot. And so if these teeth fall out, it's a death sentence for them. And so their teeth got wider, but they also grew deeper so that it was harder for them to fall out. Okay. Transitional fossils. So when we're talking about transitional fossils, they are probably the most important because they can show um, like characteristics of two groups, the older group and the more modern group. right? And they show how those transitioned from one group to the next. So they have ancestral traits, traits of the um, older species, and then they have what are called derived traits. And these are new traits that were not seen in the timeline up until that point. So things that originated from a mutation that became an adaptation are called derived traits because they're new. Remember that you can pause at any time so that you can write things down. I'm just moving through the notes. This is an example of a transitional fossil between reptiles and birds. You can see that they have, it's called the Archaeopteryx. I had a book about it when I was 7. Yes, yes, I've always been a nerd. But you can see here that there are reptilian characters and there are avian characters. Um, they had beaks, but they had teeth. They had wings, but they had claws on their wings. And so these are transitional fossils because they show that reptiles transitioned to bird species over time. Okay, biogeography. This is probably the easiest term that we're going to have on this unit. It's where things lived. See, geography of bio, got it? Um, so it's the distribution over geographical areas. Like this is um, Gondwana land. That's what it's called, I promise. It was Pangaea, which was one supercontinent, and then it split. And this is the southern supercontinent known as Gondwana land. And it's showing you different species of fossils that were found in these areas. So it shows you that before all of these continents split, when it was one, it shows you the range of where those species lived. And we can see where they used to live over time before they got split. Our example for this one are flightless birds. I saw some at the zoo on Sunday. Um, we had Gondwana land here, and we had these one species of large flightless bird. When these split up, remember their gene pool is changing differently over time because they have different mutations. They now have different climates to be better suited to, and so they change into different species. We have the rhea in South America. That's the one I saw at the zoo. They have the ostrich in Africa. They have the cassowary in Papua New Guinea, the emu in Australia, and little kiwi in New Zealand. And so this is not adaptive radiation because they split before they changed. They're not filling different niches in the same area. They changed because they were isolated from each other and they became different. Okay, embryology. This is the study of embryos. Pretty straightforward. We can see a lot of similarities in the big vertebrate groups, fish, bird, reptile, mammal, and amphibian. I don't have an amphibian picture in this one. But when we look at the embryos, we can see how they developed and we can see similarities in them over time. And so we can compare embryos in different species to find similarities and find common ancestry. A lot of the answers to your questions on the test for this unit is we're trying to determine common ancestry. And so if we have evidence that these are similar, then it implies that there's a common ancestry that they share. Okay, these are two terms that people get confused, so we'll take a second and try to talk through them, and we'll have some examples. So homologous, analogous. The definition for homologous starts with same, and homo means same. So homologous structures are structures that have the same structure, but they serve a different function for the species. Okay, so this is what is it's implying a shared common ancestor because they have similar structures, but they've now been adapted and changed to suit a different function. So we call that divergent evolution. What does that sound like? When they diverge, they split, right? So they were related and then they split. And so an example of this would be front limbs in vertebrates. That's all vertebrates, like reptiles, mammals, fish, birds, amphibians. But we have, even just in mammals, you see hands, you see paws, you see wings, you see hooves. The basic bone structure, if you look at the x-rays of them, is very similar. So that's homologous, but they have different purposes, right? Analogous, it's like an analogy. What is an analogy? An analogy is where you take two different things and adapt them for the same purpose. Okay, so that's more like convergent evolution because they're coming together, right? Wings in insects and wings in birds. Insects are invertebrates, they don't have a skeletal system, but they have wings for flight, and so do birds. And so homologous means the structure is the same, but the function is different. Analogous means the different structure, but the same function. So here's an example of some homologous structures. You can see the color coding here to show you kind of the order of these bones and how they've changed to fit their specific functions over time. Analogous structures we can see, yes, all of these technically would be homologous too because they're vertebrates, but this guy over here is not, no bones. Okay, so this insect wing versus these, they're analogous because they are different structures, but the functions are the same. Okay, vestigial structures. Um, vestigial structures are, to our mind, or to what evidence we have, useless in a common species. Um, so whales and snakes, for example, they have partial hip and limb bones. What does that mean? Hips and limbs are used for walking. So the ancestors, way back a long time ago, definitely before whales grew as big as they are, whatever the common ancestor was of the whale was on land. It walked on land. And then over time, as it became more accustomed to living in the water, it was able to grow bigger and it was surviving more if it was bigger and it didn't use its legs. And so if you don't use it, you lose it. And so over time, they became just pelvis and femur, just whatever residual bones are left because it's not hurting them to have them, but it's not helping them either. So our appendix has been thought for a long time to be vestigial. Sometimes we wonder if there might be a function, but as of right now, um, it doesn't have a known function. You can actually get your appendix removed. There may be some immune function, but I'm not up on the current research. It's been thought for a long time to be what's called a vestigial structure because you can have it removed if it gets inflamed, um, and it's not really seen as necessary for life. Okay. Oh, I wanted you to draw another one, but that's fine. We'll just move on. Here's some examples. Our wisdom teeth. We don't need it, right? Um, we don't have, we don't eat as much roughage, as many weedy like um, plants. abrasive like plants. And since we don't usually use our wisdom teeth anymore, and most of us have them cut out before they grow in or removed afterwards. Emu wings, they can't fly. So that's another example of a vestigial structure. Okay, let me see. Yep, we'll probably stop after this one. Molecular homology. So scientists can compare DNA. That's what the molecular part means. Shared genes provide evidence. Here we go again. Shared genes provide evidence that two species share common ancestors. We can compare proteins too, because remember, DNA gives us our instructions for proteins, so we can look at amino acid sequences. Um, so, for example, we can look at cytochrome C. This is a protein that all organisms have. If we look at how many amino acids are the same between different species, we can see where they diverged, right? Because if they're alike, then they were changing at the same time. And then when they split and they start to change differently, that means they're now two different species and their gene pools have separated and they're starting to change over time. So I'm going to show you this. You may see something like this, or you may see letters where you're comparing different things and you can see the different species. If we look at the horse and the chicken, it says how many are shared. So we can go, we can highlight them, and we can see that the horse and chicken have a lot of similarities in their amino acid sequence with this protein. So I think that we're going to stop there. Hopefully that should be enough for you to write down. Have a good day.